All right, another question here.
Earlier, you referred that teachers weren't seen as professionals. So I think I would like you to speak to why not, and the fact that maybe that has to do with why we have a teacher problem here, is how we view our teachers and pay them accordingly.
What do you teach?
I don't teach.
You don't teach, okay. What do you do?
I'm development director at the Ann Arbor Film Festival.
Oh, really? Can you get me free? Never mind, okay. Speak to this.
And you know, unfortunately, we've been very busy with a lot of reforms, high performance, teacher reform, teacher, we want you to perform more, we're going to judge your student test scores. We haven't done the complementary support hand clapping that we need that says, let's pay more, support better through training, professional development, upgrade the status of the occupation, find career routes that you can stay teaching, that have prestige, that give you more credentials, that give you more pay. Though the pay is not, everyone wants to find satisfaction in their career and be able to keep moving. So, you know, look at some of the other countries. There's a great report by Mark Tucker that looks at the 11 or 12 countries, you know, that we really need to benchmark ourselves, from Singapore to Finland to the folks in Europe and Asia. They have a whole different approach to teacher education and recruitment and training. It is like, you know, their teachers are treated as a country in Finland, which is, you know, the poster child right now, as we treat MBAs and law students. Very rigorous, high bars of entry to get into the profession, high expectations, high pay when you emerge, and then freedom on the job because they're so highly trained, highly prestigious, to design the learning program as they see fit without all the kind of micromanaging that we're doing over here. But that's a big change. You know, we have unfortunately treated teachers as 9-month employees. If you can't coach, teach, or is it the other way around? I'm trying to, you know, I mean, we really have not, we have too many people in the profession who probably aren't there for the right reasons. We haven't provided the high quality teacher preparation that actually helps them. It's a very hard thing to teach. Helps them learn to be great teachers. Deb Ball at the University of Michigan, the School of Education, is a national leader in what they're doing there. And let's really change what we do so that we are really supporting the ability to teach and deliver learning. And that is a whole different sea change in teacher education. But we do need to professionalize through career routes the whole occupation if we're going to see the kind of quality teaching that we need, which we know is the most important to deliver the goods. I mean, every parent knows that because we look for I hope they get the good teacher this year. I hope we've got the right teachers at Tappan or Forsyth or wherever we are, you know, because we know the power of great teaching. And making that more consistent, making it more uniform, making it more positive versus punitive is what we've got to do, or all this reform, you know, high performance. We're driving people. Why would anyone want to be a teacher today? There isn't that respect, there isn't that reward, there isn't that positive sense of excitement and support, you know, as there is, you know, to become a hotshot MBA coming out of U of M's business school.
Question here and a comment.
Well, I think just to follow up on this question, I think then we need a Teachers Hall of Fame. Because, I mean, I know a few teachers that made a difference in my life, but I think that's something to consider, perhaps. But just in full disclosure, since we have an MSU grad, I'm a U of M grad, my company's name is Maize and Green, so just alternative energies.
I consider a career in politics.
But, and I am also a candidate for the Ann Arbor School Board, Amara Iqbal. So what concerns me recently is these initiatives that have come from the governor's office about the charter school amendment, the teacher tenure reform, the school aid fund being shared with community colleges and universities, as well as the appointment of the recent new superintendent for the troubled school areas, that it seems like the governor's office is providing the leadership here and setting the agenda. But whereas the school board, like you, Mr. Austin, you're elected twice, at least you are part of our state school board. And how do we institutionalize or get some action plan direction from the school board and sort of the accountability rather than the discussion being led perhaps from a different agenda?
So in other words, you would like the school board to take a more leadership role in this?
Correct. Thank you for the follow-up, because you're right, the data is so, you could find data to show anything almost these days. And I think what you started, your comments about measuring results and having great expectations, that should be our objective. I just recently moved from overseas, and a fellow expatriate said, "Oh, you're going to Michigan? That's great because they got a great public education, and you'll save in-state tuition." And recently he moved back, and he has 6 children, and he chose Virginia based on his because he feels, again, education is cheaper, et cetera, and he has 6 kids to send through state colleges
And
potentially.
appreciate your question. And providing that kind of leadership is not only important, it is our job and what I and we have been attempting to do. A new governor elected has a lot of influence. And so harnessing that influence and taking advantage of that agenda-setting capability, a governor who wanted to tackle education early, you can harness much of good stuff to that energy and then asking the legislature to pass it. So we as a state board of education on a bipartisan basis in February, knowing that the governor was going to come out, wanted to have an education agenda rolled out early, we made very specific recommendations on here's the education agenda we think you should animate and help with as governor. And it included most of what I've been talking about. It included even clearly saying we need to do more for early childhood and more for higher ed. He didn't listen, actually he held harmless early childhood, relatively speaking. But it also said, here's the way to do tenure reform, here's the way to do these other pieces of reform. Then privately and with the governor's office, his education message informing that there is a giant section on ensuring on high-performance teachers. Because that is important and he gets it. Now, it is largely rhetorical right now. The whole section of his message, informed by us, is about trying to do more and asking us all to do more, better teacher preparation, better ongoing professional development linked to student achievement, tenure reform done in certain ways, master teachers, he named it, he called for it. What I'm now saying as president of the state board and a Democrat, but it's irrelevant what party is. Okay, governor, we need to follow through on that nice rhetoric you laid out. We follow through on some, the legislature has acted, we're doing our part at the state board and department to make the changes we can control. We need to pay for master teachers, or it's just rhetoric. He said we want to provide every teacher the tools, the training, and the support to be a great teacher. And that means we've got to support some tangible, positive things for teachers that help them feel like and really have the tools, the training, and the support.
What percentage of your recommendations got into his message?
2/3. So, but it's the 2/3 that are mostly reform, perform, high expectations, reform. It's less the here's how we support those reforms with meaningful, it's not all financial, but meaningful policy and financial support.
Very good. Question here from the audience, please.
As a faculty member with the University of Michigan, I'm interested in knowing whether or not the administration supports faculty rights to unionize.
Well, I think too happily so far, this governor and in our state, we have not had political leaders who are wanting to use the fiscal challenges we have to basically go after and destroy unions for other reasons, which is to dismantle teachers' unions and unions generally. Though we have had some recent, right to teach legislation and other things introduced that are of that ilk. The governor has not been interested in going there because there are legitimate reasons why we should change, as I said, legacy health and pension systems, just as the private sector has changed theirs. The way to do it is not cutting every school district $400 or $500 or $600 to force them to renegotiate, because some districts are doing better than that already. I mean, they made some reforms, but it's also not. We have not seen the governor support ending unions as a goal.
But she's speaking to the higher education system. You want to rephrase the question?
I teach at the University of Michigan. We talk a lot about students' rights, students' expectations. I want to know what the administration's understanding or belief or focus will be in terms of supporting faculty rights and expectations for fair wages and compensation to match our high performance.
Again, I am not a spokesperson for the administration, if you mean the governor's administration.
For the state board.
Okay. And our state board, our purview is supervise and lead all education, including higher education institutions. Though our higher education institutions do appear to have their own governance and independent decision-making structures as well. So we have not talked about that topic. We have not viewed that as part of our mandate. I was apologize for giving you, though, a broad salvo about, I think the right to organize is legitimate, appropriate, we should support it, make changes that we need to make in benefit systems and other things separately within that context.
Okay. You are all about everybody cooperating, right? All sides should cooperate. Yes?
I think we can find a lot of common ground, but
Okay,
never sacrificing what principles and what the right policy agenda needs to be. So, for example, when I was elected, Governor Engler was governor. I went immediately to Mark Murray, who had his education shop, and said, Mark, we're totally estranged, the state board, you know, what can we agree on to work together? And I went to my Republican colleagues on the board. We had been split. The board had been totally, you know, as Tim knows, sort of split, non-functional. What can we work on together? But then we had a Democratic governor. There's lots we can do together, and I would always engage my Republican colleagues in that. But it's always about what is the agenda and what can we agree on and what can we get done, not in a vacuum.
In light of that, then, was it a plus or minus for the Michigan Education Association to try to recall a state lawmaker?
I think, and I've said to them, that their time and energy and money would be better served by promoting some very strong affirmative things that we need to do in education, like let's go to the ballot with a K-12 initiative that puts more money into, because people would support it, into smaller classes, master teachers, and facilities. That's my recommendation. Yeah, so I think it's a distraction to go on these recall episodes.
All right, you also mentioned in your opening remarks about higher education funding being nicked. There probably might be some people in this room who think the nick is a little deeper than a nick.
I was being generous, I guess.
What adjective then would you
use? It's crazy to be
use?
decimating the institutions of higher learning and flipping the state support from, you know, two-thirds of the money for tuition used to come from all of us as taxpayers, and a third from your pocketbook if you're a parent. It's totally flipped. Now, and tuitions have had to go up. You cut the universities, they have to raise tuition. So now two-thirds of the cost is the parents. And it's pricing even our great high-quality, low-cost public universities out of reach. And it's crazy to be defunding them when they're such engines of new discovery, research, learning, attracting talent from all over the world to places like Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. So it is ridiculous. I can think of some more extreme adjectives here.
Well, then could you help explain to this audience why, if this is a data-driven issue, and the evidence is clear that higher education is one way to drive our economy, why does the legislature and governors, why do they continue to underfund it, sir?
Because I think, and here's an example. Governor Snyder ran, and his 10-point plan included saying it is basically crazy to keep cutting higher ed. He has not so far provided leadership to follow through on that expectation.
The former governor did exactly the same thing.
And to her discredit. So the challenge is actually, we have made more headway in all of us, the public, getting an understanding that education matters, but it's so far been, it's delimited to K-12. Like now, you know, people, Republican colleagues in the legislature can speak. People are a little more anxious about cutting K-12. They don't want to cut K-12. They really don't, you know, on a bipartisan basis, and they're anxious about it. And so they think, oh, well, higher ed can still afford it. They're still overstuffed. You know, they still waste a lot of money. They still have these overpaid faculty. They do all these wine and cheese parties and spill all, you know, on the floor. That understanding that these institutions are such engines of opportunity if they're high quality and low cost, and are overstuffed, you know, are wasting money instead of, they're the fulcrums for every new sector, every emerging economic arena, life sciences, bioenergy. You know, Bill Gates said this, comes out of research universities in conjunction with the private sector. So the understanding is not there that these institutions are so potent, where it is now people have gotten there on K-12. And I think we can make some headway if we say, let's insist on performance, like completing degrees and doing good with the money you've got. But in return, this is what they did in Ohio. Let's stop cutting the universities, but ask them to make sure they're performing. And a performance funding mechanism is, you know, part of the discussion that we need to have for higher ed, as long as it's done well, and that might help make the case.
All right,
just as we're
question here.
setting expectations on K-12 performance.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.